time each Sunday morning and look at something in Baptist history. And this morning we're going to look at a very unusual man and a very unusual testimony. And we're going to look at the life of Solomon Ginsburg. Solomon Ginsburg was born in August of 1867 in a region in Russian Poland that was very Orthodox. He was born, of course, a Jew, and he was born into a very wealthy rabbi's family. When he was growing up, he was expected to follow in his father's footsteps and was trained, extensively trained in the Talmud and other Jewish documents. And when he was 15 or 16, however, his marriage was arranged. Everything was set up. The father had hired a matrimonial agent, a matchmaker, and the boy insisted to his father, which was unusual. He didn't normally do this. He insisted that he wanted to meet the girl. He felt something funny about this, and he just felt he wanted to meet her. This is all that Jewish boys would know. This is normal. And finally, his father relented, and Solomon says he met the girl, and he says all of 11 years old. He said he was so repulsed by that and what his father and the ridiculous nature of some of these teachings that he just rebelled from the religion and ran away. And he actually ran to another part of Poland, then to Russia, eventually made his way by ship to London, where he found an uncle who took him in and gave him employment. And while he was in London, he heard the gospel for the first time. And another Jew, a converted Jew, had invited him to come hear him preach. And that night, the Jew preached on Isaiah 53. And he struggled with conviction for many months. He read the New Testament all the way through. And when he came across the words, he said, "His blood be upon us and our children." He said, "It seemed to me that I had taken an active part in the murder of the innocent one. And I realized for the first time the reason for the terrible history of the Jews, the suffering and persecutions that they had gone through and even were still enduring." Later, about a month later, he went to a mission there in London. Pastor John Wilkerson preached on the text, "He that loveth his father and mother more than me is not worthy of me," from Matthew 10. And he paced the floor all night long in deep conviction, as I mentioned, and that night he asked Christ to save him. Of course, for a Jewish young man, when he is saved, it's a terrible experience from his family. And he was expelled and excommunicated. It's a whole process that the Jewish people go through when they disinherit. And he was brought into his family and the curses that rained down on him. He said it was a terrible experience, but he was comforted by the text as he read his Bible. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. Well, immediately upon being saved, it seemed that God was calling him to preach. And so he applied to Spurgeon School, but Spurgeon School was filled to capacity, and he took his training at a congregational school, the Regions Beyond Mission College. And there was a widow of a missionary. They were missionaries to Brazil. And she offered the students to pay someone, and she'd pay their room, their board, pay them some income if they would study the Portuguese language, learn the Portuguese language, and then go to Brazil to be, at least for a year, to help there and to witness there. Well, he immediately responded to that invitation. Soon he found himself in Portugal, where he would learn the language. And then later, he made his way to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He learned the language very quickly, a brilliant young man, and he tried to be around the people and learn the language and learn their custom as quickly as possible so he could preach and witness to them. Almost immediately, he wrote his first tract as soon as he learned the language, and that tract was St. Peter was never a pope. Now, understand that Brazil is a heavily Catholic nation, of course, and that did not bode well. He later wrote another tract very soon thereafter called The Religion of Rags, Bones, and Flour. And because of those tracts, the the Catholic priests, the Catholic churches in the area just hated him, and they would follow him as he went door to door, confiscating material from behind him from the houses that he had gone to, and there were threats on his life. But anyway, Lord bless, and he held outdoor meetings and preached. He began to realize as he read his Bible that the New Testament example was to evangelize and then stay in a place until a church was organized. And that, of course, he was impressed by that because of what the priests were doing to undermine all that he was doing as he preached to individuals in their homes. So he had gone to Brazil, and he had been encouraged by someone, I'm not sure who, to really attack the Baptists who were in Brazil, because they were very active in Rio de Janeiro. And so he gave himself to studying baptism in the Bible. Now, when he was in England, he was told and taught that he really never should enter into a discussion of baptism. It wasn't necessary for the development of the kingdom of God. This is what he said was taught him, and actually maybe it was detrimental to a Christian's growth. But he read his Bible anyway, and he studied the New Testament, did a thorough investigation of baptism, and he realized, as of course he read, and God worked in his heart, that the Baptists had based their arguments on the Bible, and the Bible was the best book to decide this question. So, being persuaded of Baptist distinctives and believers' baptism, he cast his lot with the Baptists. He joined the Baptist church there in Rio de Janeiro that had been started a few years earlier, and was scripturally baptized and began to work out of that church. That was 1882, and can't spend the time, in fact, we're going to take next week to finish his story, but just amazing stories as Solomon Ginsburg preached and evangelized there in Brazil. Many times there was persecution and suffering. More than once he fled a village with bullets flying around him. The Catholic Church and the priests hated him and everything he stood for, of course, and this was unusual to have such an aggressive Baptist missionary in this region. And I wanted to tell a quick story. There was a band of bandits, a very notorious band. They committed many atrocities, robberies, murder, and their chief was Antonio Silvino. He was a desperate criminal. He had a very well-founded reputation for being very quick and accurate in his shooting. And an Italian monk who worked there in Rio de Janeiro approached Silvino. The man's name was Sestino, the monk, and he told the bandit many lies about Ginsburg and some things about what they perceived to be true about Jewish people. And he gave Silvino $50 to murder him. This is the Catholic priest. He gave him $50 to murder him. So Sestino, he agreed, and they found that he was going to be that Ginsburg was going to be in a certain village one day. And so Ginsburg left his home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and about 5 o'clock, as he was traveling, he saw a man on the road holding a double-barrel shotgun. And thinking the man was out hunting, he stopped his horse, he greeted the man, said some kind words to him, and then he rode on. Well, when he got to his destination, a church there in that town, actually the people that had gathered were kind of surprised to see him still alive. And as news spread in the village, the great crowd came together for the evening service, and the evening service lasted until almost midnight. Ginsburg was exhausted. He'd been up almost 24 hours. He went to where he was staying and fell asleep. About midnight, a little after midnight, just as he had laid down, there was a banging on the door, and someone shouted, "I am Antonio Silvino, and I want to see Senor Solomon." And Solomon's heart sank. He knew he had escaped the bandit in the morning, and he only now to be tracked down. And so, thinking that the end had come, he got on his knees and he prayed for strength to be a good testimony in his death, and he prayed for his wife and children that he would be leaving behind. He went into the next room, and Silvino said very roughly, "Do you know who I am and why I've come here?" And Solomon said, "Yes." He said, "You are Captain Antonio Silvino, and you've been hired to kill me." And Silvino said, "Yes, that's true." And so he closed his eyes, again breathed a prayer again for his family as he thought he was about to die. When he looked up, nothing happened. He looked up, and Silvino was standing there with tears and genuine admiration in his face. And he said, "The monk said, you were a wicked, dangerous person. He gave me money to kill you, and I came to kill you this morning." He said, "Early this morning," he said, "you didn't know it at the time, but you spoke to me so kindly, I decided not to shoot you at once." Maybe there's a lesson in that. Always say a kind word, right? Yeah. You never know. And so he said, "I decided not to shoot you at once, but to find out more about you." He said, "So I was in disguise at the meeting tonight at the church that you spoke at, and they were singing and praying and preaching." And he said, "Sir, I now know that you're doing a good work, and I will not kill you. I'd rather kill the man who hired me to kill you." And they talked and prayed all through the night. The bandit told him the story. He had killed 66 people in his lifetime, very wicked man. And God saved him that night. The reputation spread through most of Brazil, as just about everybody knew who this man was. He became a godly man, served God in the church there in Rio de Janeiro. And one time a reporter went to interview him, and he came back kind of disgusted. He said, "All Silvino will talk about is the Bible and those Baptists." And so it's simply wonderful, wrote Ginsburg. He said, "What the Lord can do for a poor, degraded, penitent sinner, the blood of Jesus is still efficacious and saves to the uttermost." And quite a testimony. I can't finish it this morning. I did put up on the screen a book that is actually free on Amazon, the Kindle version. And I would encourage you to read. This is an autobiography that Ginsburg wrote, and some of these stories are told in that autobiography. And wonderful Christian man, and we'll finish his story next week. But thank the Lord this morning for Solomon Ginsburg.